The key to great skin retouching is to keep it simple. Not everything needs to be technically perfect all the time, although technical perfection is nice. We don't need to use frequency separation and all the bells and whistles all the time. They're a lot of fun. They're pretty cool. But non-destructive skin retouching is as simple as creating a new layer and working on that new layer using something like the healing brush. Set that tool to sample current and below layers. Do your healing on that layer. Healing brush, it's basically a color and texture transfer brush, so try to keep that in mind as you're sampling new areas with that brush. Also experiment with hard-edged or soft-edged brushes. One of them might help you keep a little more of that precious texture in your skin. Stick around and watch the full video for some simple and beautiful skin retouching tips and tricks. Let's go. Healing small blemishes, large blemishes, frequency separation, dodging and burning, and even a little bit of that artificial intelligence that we've got in Photoshop. We're going to cover it all in this video. I'm going to show you some of my favorite little tips and tricks and techniques for retouching skin quickly and effectively. While some of it might not be technically perfect, it gets the job done. That's the most important thing. I'd rather be 80%, 100% of the time than get something that's 100% technically correct, but pull my hair out doing it. Let's jump into Photoshop and take a look at how we can get this done. All right, we've got our model here, and the first thing we want to do is keep things as non-destructive as possible. So that typically equates working with smart objects or working on new layers. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer here, and this is going to be our retouch layer. So we'll just call it blemishes or something like that. And then we're going to go in and begin getting rid of all of the immediate and obvious blemishes. We are going to use one of my favorite tools for doing this, the healing brush tool, not spot healing brush, but the regular healing brush tool. I'm going to set it to sample current and below. That's going to allow me here to work on this blemishes layer without destroying our underlying model skin, the original photo, all that good stuff. The other thing is I'm going to knock my diffusion down to around 2 or 3. Diffusion gives you like this fade effect of healing around your brush. Don't really like it when I'm trying to preserve texture of skin and not blur the skin. The other thing that I think I'm going to do here is go ahead and set the hardness of this brush very, very high. 90 to 100% is what I'm thinking here. And then I'm just going to make my brush a little bit smaller. You want to take your time when you're doing your healing and not just do huge overarching heals. So we're going to start with this little blemish here and quickly go around on our model's skin and clean up as much of the skin as we can. One of the things you do want to bear in mind while you're using the healing brush is that it's really a color and texture movement tool. So as you're sampling areas and healing them, just be careful that you're not sampling areas that are out of focus and healing that out of focus blurry stuff over areas that have a lot of texture and are very sharp. Just one thing you want to really, really keep in mind while you go about your healing. And yeah, there's not really any fast or easy shortcut. I mean, you'll see in a little bit artificial intelligence will allow you to kind of skirt this a little bit, but nothing really compares to getting in there and just, noticing, hey, look, there's just a little dark spot there. Maybe it's a pore that's a little bit bigger. It just sticks out a little bit. I don't quite like it. I want to go in there and touch it up. No big deal. We can go in and do that. All right, so now that we've done this, we've done sort of the initial process of retouching, getting rid of the big blemishes. Now we're going to apply a round of frequency separation because you might notice here on her forehead, for instance, getting rid of blemishes is not simply about getting rid of like the little pimple on your forehead or something. With that pimple comes a discoloration of the skin. And one of the best ways to make skin look smoother while preserving texture is to match color, but also reduce the contrast between the light and the dark areas, and then go back in with some dodging and burning later and apply the contrast where we want it. So when I got rid of these blemishes up here, we got rid of the textural blemish, but the color blemish is still there. Now with frequency separation, you can get rid of texture blemishes as well. I just still prefer doing it this way. I don't know. I don't really know why. It's just what I do. It's what my workflow is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge these two layers to a new layer using the hotkey Command-Shift-Option-E. That's Control-Shift-Alt and the letter E. on the PC, and then I'm going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate that. Now, when you're working with frequency separation, a lot of people name these layers high and low. That's because that's what they are. That's a high, sort of high pass layer, and then your low stuff. But to kind of keep things simple, if you've never done this before, your high pass layer is your detail, your lower layer is color and tone. So I'll just call that color tone. Here with our color tone layer, we're going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we're just going to, bang this with a couple pixels, maybe 7, something where we're just getting rid of all of the texture in the skin. So 7, this all depends on the size of your image. For this image, 7, 8, 9, something like that's going to work good. I'll go 8, cool. Then we come up here to detail, and we're going to apply this image to our color, or this layer, I should say, to our color tone layer. So we would go image, apply image, and I'm going to say, hey, don't apply it to all the images or all the layers merged together. Apply it to my color tone layer, and we're going to use the blend mode of subtract, and then this is an 8-bit image, so I'm setting the scale to 2 and the offset to 128, and you can see we're getting what looks like a punchy high pass adjustment happening to this detail layer. I'm going to hit OK. What we've done now is we've isolated our detail from our color and tone. So here on the detail layer, we simply set this to the blend mode, a linear light. It looks like we have a regular image, but we can go ahead with our healing brush now and heal either of these individual layers and just work on healing either the details or the color and tone. But the way that I generally like to do this is to add a layer above my color and tone layer, and I just call this like color or new color, whatever. I grab my brush tool and I'll set the opacity, relatively low. I don't know, 10, 20, 25%, whatever I'm feeling at the moment. You know how it is. And then I'll just sample color by holding down my Alt or Option key, and I'll begin coming in here with my my Wacom tablet. I forgot the name of it for a second. I'll use my Wacom tablet and I'll just kind of paint and just sort of fade some of this stuff together. 25 is a bit much. I'm going to hit the number 1. That's going to drop it to 10% opacity. And I'm just sampling the light color, painting over the transition area, sampling the dark color, painting over to kind of bring stuff together. It looks like there's just like the color underneath some of these blemish areas is just a little off. So I'm going to just make my brush maybe a little smaller and just get in there and say, look, just brighten up some of those areas. Stuff that looks like it's just an area where a blemish was. It's too dark. Around this highlight, I'm going to just spread the highlight a little bit, but then I'm going to grab something from this, pseudo shadow and paint over the highlight, just knock the highlight down a little bit. Same thing down here with her cheek. Grab the highlight, paint around it. Sample here in the shadow, paint over the highlight up the side of the nose, get the highlight on the nose, paint on the shadow side of the nose. That's way too much. So we're just gonna do a little on the shadow side of the nose, grab the shadow, and then paint over here with the shadow on the shadow side of her nose. And then we'll do the same thing over here with the highlight. We'll just kind of spread that highlight out and then come over here and grab the shadow and just help blend all this together. What we're doing is we're just taking her skin and just flattening it all out a little bit. We're going to add some of this back later with our dodging and burning. But for now, this is just going to help make her skin, it just makes it look smoother, but we're not destroying any of the detail by going and just blurring away all of her pores. If we zoom in on it, we still have all of her individual pores, right? We haven't gotten rid of any of that stuff. So that's really, really good. Now, one little trick you can do, we don't really need to do it here, but it's something that you might find useful. One of the ways that you can add more texture if your skin is just looking like it's really super duper flat for whatever reason, you can go ahead and create a new layer, and we'll call this skin texture. And we're going to fill this layer with, I'm going edit fill, and we're going to go, give me that 50% gray. And then you can just use noise here, filter noise, add noise. We're going to go monochromatic noise, 10% is probably fine. You could use camera raw filter as well and add noise through that. We don't need to get crazy here though. And then go filter, stylize, emboss. And 135-degree angle is probably good for me because that light is kind of coming down on that angle on our image. Height of 2 pixels. Maybe sometimes 3 pixels, that's usually going to work for you pretty well. And then set it to the soft light blend mode. If you zoom in, you're going to see that we've added just this little kind of crunchy, grainy texture. Now it looks really bad in the shadows. It looks like it's just now we've transposed this photo in oil on canvas kind of thing. So you're going to want to add a layer mask and paint it away and all of that. Maybe even reduce the opacity of your skin texture. Like I said, we don't need it. So we're going to get rid of that layer here. And then we'll look at some dodging and burning before we go ahead and take a look at healing a larger blemish, or how I kind of go about healing larger blemishes, and then some of the artificial intelligence stuff. So here is just a quick and easy way to do some dodging and burning. And there's 500 ways to do dodging and burning in Photoshop. I like to throw a curves adjustment layer in there, set it to the blend mode screen, select the layer mask, hit Command or Control I to fill it with black. Then I just grab my brush tool, right click, make it a very hard brush, kind of a small brush too, depending on where you are adding some highlights. And then just come in here and paint with this brush wherever you want the highlights to be. Now we want to make our opacity back to 100% because we're just painting these straight lines. We're painting with the color white because white in a mask is going to reveal. In this case, it's going to reveal the brightness of our curves adjustment layer. So I'm going to paint over some of these highlights that she already has. All right, don't worry. I know it looks bad, but we're gonna do the blending here in just a moment. I'm gonna add just a little there on her chin. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit there. You can add a little across the bottom lip, maybe the top right there, and then even over here on this cheek. Maybe that's a little too much probably. Just a couple little dabs of it, something like that. And then up here as well, bing, bing, bing. That's kind of the main highlight. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. And then maybe just a little here above her eye, tiny little bit over here, something like that. Maybe a little here around her mouth. Great, something like that. Bottom of the lip is good. And then maybe a little tiny bit over there. I don't know. We don't have to go crazy here. Maybe I'll add a little like that. And that's probably fine. Then we can add a second curves adjustment layer, and we're going to set this curves adjustment layer to multiply. So this is going to be our burning. Again, select that layer mask, Command or Control I to invert the layer mask, filling it with black, hiding all of that darkening. And then we'll come in here with our brush, and it's kind of the same thing. We're going to paint where we want to darken some stuff. So here we'll enhance above her eyes, maybe just to the side there underneath the lashes. Here at the base of the nose, we'll just enrich that a little bit. Coming down the middle. Here across her lips, right, like so. The shadow here at the bottom of her, right underneath her lips, and also the bottom of her chin, I should say. And then just a little bit of toning here on her cheek, and then this cheek as well, something like so. You could go a little crazy and darken up the eyebrows a little bit, something like that. And then one of the things I like to do is just kind of picture frame the face a little bit, something like this, just going around it. And now this is something that it all depends on the image and how it was shot and all of that kind of stuff. So there are going to be some times where it's just not going to look good, and that's all right. And then something like that. So once we've done all this, we've laid down the dodging and burning. Then here in our properties panel, we can just use the feather option and just feather this and feather it and feather it and feather it until it just blends, almost until it looks like we haven't done anything. And that's good. In retouching, if you can see a demonstrable difference right away, it's probably not a good thing. So we're going to just go ahead and blur and blur and blur. And all of this, the dodging and burning, as well as the tonal adjustments to her skin, they all serve to retouch and smooth out blemishes in her skin. And I'll probably come in here and tweak and adjust the dodging and burning in particular a little bit more before I let this go. And then one other, last thing, do something like a color lookup table. Maybe we'll go crisp warm and set this to 45% opacity. Just give it overall a warming effect. And you can see here, there was before and there is after. Going through, we've preserved all that texture in her skin. We've a little frequency separation, a little bit of that healing brush on a new layer, and then trying to get the colors and tones underneath the texture right. Now, of course, you can spend as much or as little time doing this as possible. This is a general workflow. Let's go ahead here and take a look at a larger blemish and how I go about attacking that. All right, here we've got this photograph of this woman, and she's just said, hey, look, picture's great. Can we just do something about the lines under my eyes, clean up those areas a little bit? This will be something that's fairly common that you want to clean up. But the trick is, particularly with this type of retouching, if you just go and just completely get rid of all the detail under her eyes or just completely get rid of everything, it doesn't look good either. It looks noticeably fake, and everybody kind of looks at it and they're like, we know you really don't look like that, Sandra. Or whoever. So the key is going to be, don't get rid of the sort of creases under the eyes. Let's just lessen them. Let's shave a couple years off and make this look a lot better. And here's how I like to go about doing this. So the first thing is with lines or shadows or darkness under the eyes, we'll just bring the brightness up a little bit with a curves adjustment layer. Let's increase the brightness. Let's select that mask, Command or Control I, grab our brush, and I'm going to go with a little bit of a bigger brush. I'm going to make it a softer edge brush. So let's just go very, very soft. And then also reduce the opacity way down. Now we could use the same technique we did a moment ago with our dodging and burning, but I'm not doing that here. So I'm just gonna add a little light underneath her eyes just to lift the shadows a little bit, right? There's before, there's after. Very, very subtle. Again, you want your changes in retouching to be subtle changes. That usually means that they're just gonna be better. And now that we have underneath our eyes lightened up a little bit, I want to work with the patch tool. So we're going to merge both these layers together. Command, Shift, Option, E. Remember, Control, Shift, Alt, E. I'm crazy about naming my layers, so I'm going to call this patch tool. And we're going to go ahead and grab our patch tool right here underneath the healing brush. We're going to set the patch tool to Source, and give it a relatively decent diffusion. We don't want to go too crazy with diffusion, but something like 4 or 5 will probably be good for something like this. Now I'm going to begin here with this eye, and we're going to make a selection over the eye, kind of like this, or not over the eye, underneath over the bottom part of the eye, or what is underneath the eye. Now, I don't want my patch tool to have very hard edges in this case. So a couple things we can do. We could go select and modify and feather, but we can't really see how much we're blurring it if we do that. We could also enter into the quick mask mode and blur the quick mask mode. So we do that by hitting the letter Q. There, the cutout area is what we will have selected. We go filter, we go blur, we go Gaussian blur, and we can just adjust our blur here and say like, I don't know, something like 8, 9, 10, something right around there is probably good. We don't want to go too crazy, hit OK. And then hit the letter Q to get out of quick mask mode. And then we just drag this puppy down, and something like that should be all right. Command or Control D to deselect. And we can see there's before, there's after. It looks bad. We're not finished though. Let's just go ahead and get the other eye. Let's go ahead and do the same little process here. Let's grab this. Another thing, when you have a lot of sort of the beginnings of the crow's feet coming out, it's not necessarily a bad idea to take your healing brush and go in and try to get rid of some of those kind of lines zipping and zapping in around your subject's eyes, just to give the patch tool an even better time in terms of helping things to line up and look pretty good. All right, hit the letter Q again. We're going to go filter. I'm just going to apply the same Gaussian blur, and then hit the letter Q to get out, and then let's drag this down just like that. Command or Control D to deselect. All right, so there you can see we've gotten rid of the lines, but it also looks kind of sort of pretty unrealistic, although it has really gotten rid of those lines. A couple little color and light issues, but we're not going to worry too much about that right now. I'll show you kind of how I work around some of this stuff. I'm going to just zoom in here on the image like that, and we're going to focus here on the eyes, or underneath the eyes, because I want to do some of that blending. We'll go up here to layer style blending options. This is going to pop open our layer style dialog box here. I'm going to find a place on screen, or sort of on screen for it, and just keep a look under the eyes. What we're going to do is we want to target the blend if slider for the underlying layer, and we just want to kind of fade this effect back off of some of the brighter areas. Because remember, that divot, the wrinkle, we see the wrinkle because there's a shadow as light passes over the surface. So if we can just use our patch to kind of fill in some of the darker areas, but kind of just lift yourself off of some of the brighter areas a little bit, maybe this will look good. So we'll hold down Alt or Option and split that handle and just drag it back. And I'm going to keep a look. I'm going to keep an eye on underneath her eyes. And something pretty extreme, like almost dragging it all the way over. We can see before and after, and we'll hit OK. Now, what we've got is we've really gone ahead and reduced how much of the darker part of the wrinkle is seen, but we haven't altogether gotten rid of it. So we've done a relatively decent job blending it together. I do want to add a little bit more texture under the eyes, just to kind of really cover up the work that we've done though. So let's do this by just merging all of our layers together. Command Shift Option E. That's Control Alt E. Control Shift Alt E on the PC. Yeah, I'm losing track of what's going on here. And then we're going to come up here and go Filter, Other, High Pass, and just something 2 or 3 pixels. That's probably fine. Maybe 2. Yeah, probably 2 here will be good for us. Let's set this to the blend mode overlay. And I like the texture up here on her forehead. So we want to move texture from her forehead down underneath her eyes. So we're just going to take this texture and we're going to move it straight down. So something right around there. We'll see, there's the texture I want there. We might have to do this in 2 layers here. That's all right. We're going to take this texture and we're going to apply a layer mask. Hold down the Alt or Option key to apply a filled layer mask. And we're going to grab our brush tool, set it to opacity of like 25, and paint with white. And we're just going to paint in some of that texture underneath that eye. Might not look like it's doing very much. I might have to zoom in a little bit more, particularly on the recording. We can see there's before, there's after, right? So you're just really blending things together. And then we'll duplicate this layer, Command or Control J. And let's hold down Shift to just temporarily hide our mask. And we're going to drag this over underneath the other eye. I'm going to look for the texture that looks like it would fill in where I want more texture, like so. Hold down Shift to reapply the layer mask, but we want to repaint it. So let's just fill the layer mask with black. So with the layer mask selected, we'll go Edit, Fill, and from the drop-down menu, choose black. Again, there's a million different ways we can do that too. I just did it that way because I can. I'm going to select my brush tool again. Nice big soft brush, opacity 25%. We're painting with the color white, and we're just going to paint in here and add more texture back here beneath her eye. And it's texture that already comes from her skin because it is texture we're just taking right off of her forehead. And then the final thing you could do here, if there's blotchiness, you could go in, create a new layer, and maybe name this layer color, because that's really what it is, color and tone. Set the layer to the blend mode of color. And come in here with the brush, and again, really low opacity, hold down Alt or Option, and just sample and select some of the color around her eye, and just begin painting, and just trying to blend it together a little bit better than it is now, something like that. And then I'll come over here, and I would do the same thing over here. Again, just trying to, not only are we trying to get rid of the wrinkliness a little bit, but once we do some of that healing, we want to make sure the color and tones are nice and smooth, so it doesn't look like a complete disaster, whether it is we're healing something under someone's eyes, or I've worked for different medical institutions where there'll be before and after images where somebody maybe had a terrible accident and there's repair that needs to happen, and covering up some things like that. You know, sometimes you have large blemishes, I'll put it that way, that you would go in and heal or correct, and different things like that. So that's generally my approach, is doing something just like that. Here we'll do a little before and after action for you. There's before and there's after. So we retain a lot of the realism of what she's got. We just kind of soften it a little bit, right? And that's really what you want to go for when you're doing your skin retouching, is real, but let's soften things a bit. Let me show you the artificial intelligence before we get out of here. I'm going to duplicate this image, and I am going to just delete everything that we did. And let's go ahead and go filter. We're going to choose the neural filters here. And here in the neural filter, I have this skin smoothing. And by the way, you'll see with all your different filters, you got to go and download the stuff you want to use. But I can turn on skin smoothing, and Adobe's artificial intelligence will attempt to target her face and begin smoothing things out. We can crank up the blur, we can increase or decrease smoothness, and you'll see each of these operate on different axes of things that Photoshop's artificial intelligence, that Sensei is looking for. So you can come in here and play around with this. You can see it's still not doing as good a job as we did when we went in manually, but this is much, much faster. And it is doing an okay job. But part of what I don't like is you begin to really lose a lot of detail because it's applying some blur to the skin. So, you know, it's just, you're kind of taking one with the other when you come for the speed of Adobe Sensei. So one thing maybe that you might want to do, kind of overdo it a little bit with the smoothness and blurring if you're going to do this, and then output it to a new layer, hit OK. And then you could zoom in here on this, and you could do a couple things. You could straight up, well, let's just compare before, after. So it is doing something. You could just reduce the opacity a little bit. Or, of course, we still have that option to open up our layer style. I just double-click the layer and blend if. So I want to remove some of that blurring from the brighter parts of my image, but obviously I still want to cover up some of the dark spots because those are the blemishes there on her face, right? There's before, there's after, and I can hit OK. And it's just going to go in and help cover up a lot of that stuff. But obviously it's not quite to the level of our final product over here, but we took a little bit more time to do that as well. So there you have it. That's retouching small blemishes, big blemishes, taking a look at frequency separation real quick, and some dodging and burning real quick, and artificial intelligence in Photoshop real quick. Go ahead and like this video if you liked it. I love you guys so much. Thanks for checking the video out. I'll see you in the next one.